Welcome, CFL fans, to this first ever installment from CFL Fans Toronto, where we champion the entire CFL, give focus to our local Toronto Argonauts, and connect with fans in Toronto and across the league to discuss the game that we all love. You can find CFL Fans Toronto on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Meetup. My name's Dallas Bergen. I'm a lifelong CFL fan. I grew up in Regina, and Toronto's been my home for 15 years. I'm an Argo season ticket holder. I am just a fan, not a super knowledgeable pundit. I've never done anything like this before. But what I'm trying to do here is fill what I see as a need in particularly Toronto for more content covering the CFL and in particular the Argos. I think our local media outlets are letting us down with their lack of coverage of the Argos, and it's one of the things that's led to the decline in attendance and a waning interest of the Argos in the city. Mike Hogan does an awesome job with the Argos as Director of Communications, but his content comes exclusively from the team, and so quite often isn't picked up by other media, and so there just isn't a lot for us to grab onto when it comes to talking about what's going on with the Argos. So I'm hoping to fill a little bit of that void. We're going to call this installment a training camp report or a training camp preview. It was a sad day on Saturday as all CFL clubs would have been opening their camps. Many of us would have been chatting with one another in the stands, taking photos, taking notes. And instead, we are here at home wondering if there is even going to be a season. Let's hope. Anyway, here's a look at the Toronto Argonauts 2020 roster. We're going to start first on the defense. I'm going to run down some of the recent acquisitions. An acquisition of a linebacker, Curtis Akins. This was on February 24th. Not someone with CFL experience, so this was after the frenzy of CFL free agency had run its course, but Akins went to Memphis, and 2019 was his first year out of college. He went undrafted with the NFL, but saw practice time with the Bengals, Chargers, and Bills, and we've got him slotted in at the middle linebacker position behind Bear Woods and Jeff Knox Jr. And now to the CFL free agency signings. We've got Ricky Neal, defensive lineman. He spent the 2019 training camp with the Calgary Stampeders. He's just 24 years old, so there could be potential there. On that same day, we signed Cresden Butler. Butler was with the Argonauts for about a week last July, following a pretty stellar season with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. He was released after that week here and picked up by BC, and he finished the year with them at field corner, had a pretty solid outing with them at that position, and so I'm thinking he's going to line up at our field corner position. I know that has some of you questioning that, so we're going to talk about that in a little bit when we get to the depth chart, but first we'll move on. Paul Kozacek, University of Toronto linebacker, so part of the Operation Bring 'em Home of Southern Ontario and GTA area players, which I gotta say I really love. I think a lot of other fans are excited about this movement as well. Jordan Powell, defensive back from Widener, and that's a Div 3 college in Pennsylvania. On February 14th, in the free agency hoopla, we signed Arjun Colhoun, who's a Southern Ontario player, started with the Edmonton Eskimos at field corner, adding more depth there along with Matt Boateng. That field corner position is one we're going to talk a lot about today, but we'll get to that in a bit. If you want to be the best, poach the best. Going after championship winning players and coaches is about the oldest strategy in the book, but it's one because it's proven to work. We went out and nabbed Craig Rowe and Drake Nevis from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and I think those are two awesome acquisitions for a much improved defensive line. Denzel Radford, a defensive back from the University of Calgary. He was with the Saskatchewan Roughriders last year at the safety position. A really excellent special teamer as well. He's going to be in tough backing up at that safety spot, as he'll be competing with Argonauts veteran Robert Woodson, as well as incoming Dondre Wright. But Radford is a good one on teams, so we'll see what happens there. On February 12th, we acquired Jordan Moore, a linebacker from the Hamilton Tiger Cats, whom we also involved in a swap of neg list players. He had a heck of a game against the Argos to close out the season, and is a player I'll talk about a little later when we get to the depth chart. Another big signing that day was linebacker Chris Aki. He looks to be coming in to start at our will linebacker position. Had a great time with the BC Lions, and I think that's a really key signing for us as well. We acquired Fabian Foote from the Montreal Alouettes, a defensive lineman. Really in great shape. If you've seen any of his workout videos, he's a Toronto guy, so super happy to have him back in the fold. At that defensive tackle position, he missed just 3 games in the past 2 seasons with Montreal, and so we've got a fixture on our defensive line coming in there. Another defensive lineman, Alex Bazzi, another former BC Lion, and was with the Edmonton Eskimos, but he wasn't able to find his way into the starting lineup as the Eskimos elected to stick with the young Nick Usher at the other defensive end position. And so Bazzi's got an opportunity here in Toronto to be a starter on this line at the rush end position. We also brought in Nick Shorthill from King County, McMaster grad, another local product. Another big signing was Tommy Campbell at the cornerback position, former Calgary Stampeder and Montreal Alouette. We also signed Obina Ieoma out of Northwestern at the defensive end position. We're now into pre-free agency acquisitions, although I'll name a couple key ones. Jeff Knox Jr. we've brought back to the linebacker position, probably in the middle behind Bear Woods. But Jeff Knox Jr. had a great couple of seasons with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, went down to the NFL, came back and had looks in Ottawa and Toronto, but wasn't able to stick with either. Although once the new regime took charge here, they went out and acquired him. And lastly, one of the biggest signings on defense, someone we'll talk about right away when we get to the depth chart, is Bo Lacombo. Hard-hitting defensive back and linebacker. Played safety last year with Montreal, but played Sam linebacker with the British Columbia Lions. And somebody who I think is going to be a real impact player on this Argos defense. I've put a couple of our draft picks on the depth chart as well, even though rookies haven't been signed to contracts for this season due to COVID-19. In the second round with the 11th pick, we took Jack Cassar, linebacker from Carleton, and also in the second round with the 20th pick, Sam Achimpong on the defensive line out of Laurier, and you'll see them on the depth chart as well. When you're constructing a roster in the CFL, you're managing a few things. Salary, as you need all of your player salaries to fit under the SMS, and also the ratio, the import-non-import ratio, or the national-international ratio as it is now, as well as considering age and longevity of players and how players you acquire fit into your systems and scheme. On a CFL roster, you have 3 designated quarterbacks, leaving you with 20 nationals, 21 internationals, and as it was in 2019, 1 player of global designation. For the Argos this year, we're going to get to the offense, but I have them starting 5 nationals on offense, which means that we're looking at starting just 2 on defense. Linebacker with Chris Aki, and at the safety position with Bo Lacombo. Now you're probably raising eyebrows at me not having mentioned the field corner position when we've acquired Argent Colquhoun, and considering the play of Matt Boateng on the corner last year, I think those guys are outstanding and going to give us great depth. But because I have 5 nationals starting on offense and just 2 on defense, I've gone with an import player at the field corner position. Let's talk first about the safety position. As mentioned, we look to have Bo Lacombo probably starting there. And what gives a nod to a Canadian and him at that position is the depth of safeties behind him in Woodson, Wright, and Radford. So we've got considerable depth there, and Lacombo obviously is the projected starter given his CFL experience. Looking at the rest of the secondary, we'll go to that field corner position. That could be talked about for hours on the Argos. Matt Boateng had a number of starts at that cornerback position this past year and played relatively well, certainly well for a rookie. And we've acquired another Canadian in Argent Colquhoun who's also started at that position. But I've got Cresden Butler penciled in there based on a few things. First of all, the field corner position is the only position he's played in the CFL. And he has played it quite well with Saskatchewan and BC. Some might say that his physical play is squandered a bit at that field corner position. He's a really physical player and a hitter. But I think given that all of his CFL experience is at that position, that is one of the reasons why I have him slotted in there. What that means is that Shaq Richardson, also a capable starter, is going to be moving elsewhere in the secondary. He even said so himself in an interview, I think in early February, where he basically said there's no way he's going to be on the field corner position this year. While he doesn't make decisions for the coaches, I'm somewhat inclined to agree. I actually have him at the Sam linebacker position, which might be a bit of a surprise, but given his track record, I think it's a possible or probable move. He did play Sam with the Calgary Stampeders a few years ago, started at that position, and played very well there. He likes to stick his nose in it as a defensive player, and that's going to get him closer to the box. He'll be in a position where he's both covering elite receivers and getting down into the box, trying to bring down running backs. The other potential player at that position is certainly Alden Darby. Darby last year split most of his time between the corner and safety positions, though over the course of his CFL career, he's played the most at the halfback position and some Sam linebacker as well. I have him at halfback, partly given his size, but also because I think he's really going to mentor that secondary, which behind the starters certainly is going to be a very young group of a number of import players coming up to the CFL for the first time. So I see him being the leader in the secondary at that halfback position. And moving to the other side of the field, I've got Tommy Campbell at the boundary corner, who's played that position really well in Montreal and Calgary. And at the other halfback position, that's the one I think is up for grabs on the depth chart. I have Jeff Richards, former Ottawa Red Black. You may remember he picked off Bo Levi Mitchell in the 2016 Grey Cup at BMO Field. And his play with the Red Blacks was solid enough that it got him some NFL looks in the years that followed. He's back to the CFL. And so because of that experience in Ottawa and that look-see in the NFL, I'm going to give him the edge. Another player who could compete for that other halfback position is Chris Humes, former Winnipeg Blue Bomber. And behind him and everyone else I've mentioned as starters, we have a whole wealth of unknown, most of them young American defensive backs. What is interesting about this group is that most of them are big, and that makes me think that it's possible that we're looking at maybe having one of these guys eventually move into that Sam linebacker position. Sam linebackers in the CFL, first of all, they require some seasoning in a CFL secondary, as that Sam position is quite hard to play, both because of the waggle movement of receivers as well as the 12 players in wider field. It's a position that takes time to learn. But what is also true about that position is you need the most athletic, physically strong, fast players who are able to cover the league's elite receivers and also get in there and make a lot of tackles in the box. And so if you look at some of the guys I've put on the depth chart behind Richardson, these are guys that played that strong safety position in college. And so they've got size in that regard, like a linebacker, but also the speed for coverage skills. And so, first of all, Travis Feeney, man, this guy is a physical specimen. He's got an impressive highlight reel on YouTube. He is 6'4", 230 pounds, a strong safety who is not afraid to muck it up. And I think this is someone that they could be grooming at that Sam position. Similarly, James Sample, who was a 4th-round NFL draft pick, got lots of looks in the NFL before making his way to Toronto. He's 6'2", 215. And a couple guys I've put behind him are Jason Beck, who is 6'1", 220, and Kadeem Satchel, 6'2", 210. Again, these are physical college players who played the strong safety position, which is ideally suited for that Sam linebacker position in the CFL. Look at the other defensive backs remaining. I admittedly don't know a lot about them, but they more often played cornerback in college and so are more likely to be lining up at the corner or halfback positions, and you can see them listed on the depth charts as well. All right, so that's our look at the defensive secondary. We'll look first at the middle linebacker position, anchored by Bear Woods, fantastic CFL veteran. I think the only question with him is his longevity. How much does he have left, given a history of injuries? I think he proved a lot of naysayers wrong last year, coming back and showing that he can play as well as he has in the past in his career. And for that reason, I think he's going to be a starter at the middle linebacker position. Behind him, you've got Jeff Knox Jr., who can play both will linebacker and in the middle. Solid CFL veteran, had a great time, especially in Saskatchewan. And as mentioned, Aikens behind him, and then Jordan Moore. Again, Jordan Moore had that great game against Toronto, the final game of the season. He is just 26 years old and is a really versatile player, it appears. He is sized like a will linebacker. He's a little light to play in the middle, and yet he had that fantastic game against the Argos in the middle. And in college, he played safety and even ran track. And so this is somebody that can obviously cover. He's got speed. And so I think maybe even Sam linebacker is a possibility for Jordan Moore. So he seems to be capable of playing any of the 3 linebacker positions. And for that reason, I'm thinking he might have a future with this team. I'm going to call him an X factor. And at will linebacker, we have Chris Aki penciled in. He's a 5-year CFL veteran, great number of years in Montreal, the short stop in Ottawa. And it looks like we'll start him. And the reason I think that is because of the signings behind him. We have 3rd-year Argonauts Cuemo, as well as recent signings Nick Shorthill and Paul Kozacek. Those guys are all built for that will position. And being Canadians, it's possible we see all of them on the roster. That's also the go-to position for special teams players in the CFL. And so maybe we'll get a peep of all of them. But look for Aki to be a solid starter in that role. That takes us to the defensive line. The one name I've mentioned already is Keenan Gilchrist, who was an impressive rookie with the Argos a couple years ago. He has played both will linebacker and defensive end. He is listed as a linebacker with the Argos, although I think will is probably the only position, based on his body type and experience, that he could play. So again, I'm not sure what his future is, although maybe he could be moved to this defensive end position. One of the other questions here, similarly, is Robbie Smith, who seems a bit like an outlier to me as well. The reason for that being that he is the only Canadian defensive end on this roster, and he is one of only a couple or few defensive line players that are nationals. He did have an outstanding rookie season last year and was our nominee for Rookie of the Year, playing at the defensive end position. But I think it's possible you see him as a rotation player on that defensive line. He has the size to play inside, and so you could see him in rotation at end and in the interior. And the reason I think he won't start is because of the acquisition of Bazzi and in particular Craig Rowe, who I think will start at this quick defensive end position. And moving across the defensive line, we've got Big Drake Nevis at nose tackle, all 300 pounds of him. A couple of similar big bodies behind him, Julian McLeod and Ronald Ollie. And I've also included our draft pick, Achampong, at that position as well. Also on the interior of the defensive line, Argonaut returnee Justin Thomas, as well as Fabian Foote, our national and local product in rotation. And on the other end of the defensive line, we have incomer Alex Bazzi. Bazzi broke out with the BC Lions, but came back to the CFL with the Edmonton Eskimos. Surprisingly, he was not able to crack the lineup as a starter with Edmonton, given the incredible quality of their defensive line. He wasn't able to take that starting position from young Nick Usher. And so Bazzi comes to Toronto really trying to reestablish himself as an elite defensive end in the CFL. Behind him, I've got Earl O'Kine, who was with Saskatchewan last year and saw quite a bit of playing time down the stretch. It's not very often you could see a guy and mistake his body type for that of Willie Jefferson. I think maybe Jeremy O'Day thought he'd try and go find the next Willie J, and looked to Earl O'Kine, who is thicker than Jefferson, but the same 6'7" with long, rangy arms. He's going to have a reach of up to 9 feet, which can be incredibly intimidating for quarterbacks and offensive tackles both. And so I'd like to see O'Kine push for a rotational role on this defensive line. I think there's lots of potential there. All right, before we leave the defense, just a couple of last comments. First of all, a outlier possibility. I noticed that Bo Locombo is listed on the roster as a linebacker. This is peculiar because he did play Sam linebacker in BC, even though he most recently played safety with Montreal. I think lots of fans and pundits are penciling him at safety, and I did as well. But there is this possibility that he could start at Sam linebacker. Now, what would deter that possibility is the fact that there aren't other nationals on the roster that could play that very difficult position. And generally, you want to have a national to back up a national player on a roster. But when you have guys like Robbie Smith and Arjun Colquhoun who can start, what that allows you to do is play one of your designated imports at that position if Locombo goes down, and then you in turn need to take another import off of the field, but that could be done at that defensive end or position on the corner. And so this just lifts up how important national depth is on a CFL roster. When you have those starting capable players, it opens up all kinds of possibilities. And that's our defensive preview of the 2020 Toronto Argonauts. keep an eye out for an upcoming episode on the Argonauts offense. I want to thank you again for listening. I'm just a fan looking to share my love of the CFL and encourage banter between other fans. So engage with us and others, CFL Fans Toronto, and all the other great fan groups and fan casts from across the league. Two and Out, Let's Talk CFL, Mouchoir, Eskimo Empire, Piffles Podcast, and more. And local to Toronto here, the Argos Fancast. I also encourage you to get on the argofans.com fan board. Check out Ben Grant's awesome X's and Argos analysis. This is from a real football mind. And join the many groups on Facebook and engage in discussion. You can find CFL Fans Toronto on the South Concourse at halftime at every Argos game. And if you're in Toronto, join our meetup group, and I encourage you to bring out new fans. There's no shortage of sports fans in Toronto. We've got friends who love sports in Toronto but aren't fans of the CFL. And if this league is going to thrive, we're going to need to be the ones to bring those people out. It's on us to be advocates for the league, to be its promoters, to be its marketers. So bring them out, because it's on us. That's all for this pilot episode from CFL Fans Toronto. Take care all.